All right, welcome everyone. So this is our first inaugural resolution writing workshop held by members of MAG, MAA, and Emory, incidentally this time, but certainly should not be exclusive to our group. We just had a critical mass and felt like it was time to get this started. And so thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Shami Das. I'm an emergency medicine physician at Emory, an alternate delegate to the AMA to MAG, also represent my specialty society, ASAP, as an alternate delegate there, and just been involved in the organized medicine for a while. But we've got a number of great guests with a lot of experience. So you're in for a treat tonight. So just as a overall 30,000 foot perspective in terms of our objectives today, we're going to be talking about the basics of organized medicine. And so for some of you who may have been involved previously or are familiar with it, I apologize for the redundancy, but it's just to make sure that we just want to make sure that everyone's on the same as we move forward. And so we'll talk about how organized medicine actually impacts change, and in that probably sharing some of our stories about what's motivated us, and hopefully will be inspiring to you to continue this journey if you've just started, and should remind those folks who have already been involved in organized medicine of why this all matters. And then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of what policies are and how do they impact change and what does it even mean. And towards the end, we'll share some examples from our own experience of policies that we've either co-authored or helped develop or reviewed, and give you some guidance. And I do want to spend the majority of our time at the end. As you see, there's only, you can't see this, but there's only like 19 slides. And so I do want to spend the majority of our time hearing from you. This is a small group, so I hope that we can be open and share with each other kind of our thoughts and look for guidance from each other and from the panelists themselves on how to move forward with whatever ideas you might have for the upcoming House of Delegates in October for MAG, and the AMA meeting. The deadline for that meeting is also coming up here shortly as well. So without further ado, I will allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and they won't have to read off their slides because they know who they are, but the text is there for your guidance if you prefer to read. And we'll start off with Dr. Tracy Henry.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy you all decided to take this critical first step in coming and hear how you can make change through resolution writing, which eventually leads to policy making in organized medicine groups. I'm an associate professor of medicine at Emory University. And a little bit about me, I've been attending organized medicine groups like the American Medical Student Association, American Medical Association, and my current specialty society, the American College of Physicians, ever since I was a medical student, including a first-year medical student. And I've co-authored or testified for numerous resolutions that have successfully passed. Some of those are gender equity in medicine, workplace violence, misinformation in medicine, and addressing the social determinants of health, and also several healthcare payment-related policies. I am currently a House of Delegates or delegate to the AMA House of Delegates for the American College of Physicians. I am also the chair-elect of the American College of Physicians Council of Early Career Physicians, which is a national position, and also a chair of the Young Physician section of the Medical Association of Georgia. I am available if you guys have questions after this workshop, and I look forward to discussing resolution writing tonight.
Thanks, Tracy. Up next, we have Dr. Len Leckenfeld.
I hate to say this, but you're having me go in front of my wife, and who's sitting right behind me here, although she's on the screen. I don't know if that's such a good idea, but you're in charge of this one, okay? Yeah. So my name is Len Leckenfeld. I am an internist and medical oncologist, and
oh, we lost you, Len.
How's that? Does that work?
That's better.
Does that work? At least for now. I shifted off to the camera. I'll cut that out so we don't get the feedback from Sandra. Anyway, I've been involved in organized medicine for a long time. And Tracy, you mentioned from the time you were a medical student, I was involved in something called the Student American Medical Association way back when. But practice was a lot different when I first started back in the mid-'70s. And being engaged in policy at the local, state, and eventually the national level was something that I felt very strongly was important. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because there's a lot of water under that bridge, but I have been very active initially in Maryland in the State Medical Society and my specialty society. I've been involved in the AMA for many, many years as a delegate also from initially the American Society of Internal Medicine, now the American College of Physicians. And I sat on a committee called the Relative Value Update Committee, which is a committee that helps to advise Medicare for the Medicare fee schedule. And I'll also share, by the way, the best outcome of my advocacy on that committee was meeting my wife, who was also in that committee and also a delegate to the AMA. So good things can come out of the service. I have a lot of thoughts about medical policy and engagement, and we'll probably have a chance to share them. But you get a lot of opportunity when you commit to this. You get a lot of opportunity to engage in a lot of different ways. But the point is, you always have to keep on plugging forward, even in the face of when you have defeats or think you have defeats, and you move forward and get success. I have a phrase I use that people think that I'm a little crazy when I say it, but I call it the Bozo Effect. And those of you who probably don't know this, but there used to be a toy called Bozo the Clown, and you would punch Bozo, Bozo would fall over, Bozo would stand back up. You have to be like Bozo the Clown, believe it or not. You're going to get punched, you're going to fall down, and you got to stand back up. You will not win, probably as much, if not more, than when you do win. But working together, and Tracy knows we've shared this before, and Sandra, of course, I think working together and getting a result is so critically important and is such a good feeling when you have a team around you of like-minded people who are forcing a process towards a conclusion, which, by the way, can take multiple steps over a lengthy period of time. That's extremely rewarding, and it's something that keeps you going. That I call that Bozo Effect. It keeps you getting back up and going back for more, even when you sit in a congressional committee and somebody on the opposing side looks at you in Congress and you're testifying, and they say, give you a lot of grief about it. And you just sort of sit there, you take it, you come back, you're polite. And it's surprising how often you can make progress in things that are important to you, to your profession, to your organization. So with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for volunteering. And as you suggested to your better half, we have Dr. Sandra Reed.
I've been also involved since residency, starting out with the American College of OBGYN, and then in private practice was selected to be a representative to the House of Delegates of the Georgia delegation, and then asked to be on the AMA delegation. And I have served nationally on the AMA delegation. I've also served for 4 years on the Practicing Physician Advisory Council for CMS. So I've been around the table for policy. I currently sit as the District 4 chair for the American College of OBGYNs. And this seat places me on the national board for the ACOG. It also spans from Maryland to Georgia to Puerto Rico, the West Indies, and Argentina. So it's a pretty large district. It's actually the largest district in ACOG. But more importantly, I have been involved in writing resolutions and participating in policy changes. And as Len alluded, I did sit at the RUC and although he said the RUC was where we met, we actually met at the AMA, and maybe connected at the RUC, but met at the AMA. Maybe too much information, but the importance, and one of my motivating goals for being involved was that I was a rural physician for 25 years in South Georgia. And there was not a lot of representation of that community in leadership. And I knew coming out that I wanted to represent rural Georgia because that's where I grew up. That's my community. That's my home. And there's a lot of disparities there. There's a lot of difference between what happens in a urban community versus what happens in a rural community. And they need a voice. The physicians need a voice that practice in that environment. And I was willing to do it. I knew I had a 30-year or 40-year career ahead of me, and felt that if I did not speak up and represent this segment of leadership, then we would get left behind. Unfortunately, I don't think we have had as much representation as we need, even with me driving 4 hours one way to Atlanta monthly to attend all of these meetings. But don't think my voice has not been there. And I've testified to the legislature on issues with disparities in rural medicine. I've helped write resolutions, and I am still an advocate for women's health, rural health, and physician advocate as well. So that's kind of who I am.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Reed. I think it's important as we think about this as MAA members and in Atlanta that it's helpful to have someone who's had experience in rural areas. And so to your point, I think one of the things that brings me to advocacy and organized medicine is particularly what you said about influencing the practice of medicine and influencing our careers in the environment in which we work. I joined it like all three of you as a medical student, became active as a resident, held a number of positions on RFS, and then also here locally. But I'm really passionate about the ability to impact change and the ability to influence a process that I'm impacted by. The saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think in medicine that's true as anywhere else, in that there are a number of different stakeholders that influence policy in healthcare. And physicians are but one of those. And one of the best things about our profession is the altruism that we enter the profession with, and take an oath to uphold is putting the patient first and making sure that the patient's interests always supersede all others. And I think that's something noble about our profession and something I value and I take pride in. And for me, that's something I work hard towards ensuring that we keep that end of the oath, always putting the patients first and trying to figure out what we can do to ensure that we're getting the best care possible. As an emergency medicine doc, areas that interest me primarily are access to care, and then also scope of practice. And so that's enough about us. I do want to start off. So this talk is organized medicine as a whole. It doesn't necessarily have to represent AMA, MAA, MAG, or any other organized medical society, specialty section, for example. The concepts, I think, hold true regardless of the level that you're at. The scope is probably the biggest difference of the policies and things that you're writing between those different levels of organizations. But the goals, I think, of today will be applicable for all of those settings, no matter where you're looking to impact change. So I want to start with a video that's only 2 minutes. And I am going to see if this works. So I had it queued up a moment ago. And I just need to find it. So, Can you all hear that? So that video was just a short blurb that was introduced at one of the more recent meetings in AMA's efforts to really showcase what the scope of the organization is. And honestly, when I look at that, it's a little overwhelming because the AMA does a lot. And organized medicine does a whole lot. And even our own specialty societies are involved in a lot of different areas. And so when we talk about the power of organized medicine, the scope is so broad that it touches everything. I guess that's probably the biggest thing I want to point out is that it really touches all aspects of healthcare delivery. And so as you move forward and you deal with your everyday lives and you deal with your clinical practice and the challenges that you face, I think it's important to recognize that organization has an influence and a role along the whole spectrum. And that parlays into the next point of, well, what does AMA do, for example? And so AMA takes all of these different areas. So you saw a lot, everything from payment reform to access to care, to medical education, to continuing medical education, equity in medicine. I mean, there's a whole number of things. And the policies that are developed at the House of Delegates at all organizations impact various areas of medicine, right? So we communicate with the public, with physicians. There are regulatory bodies, as you heard of with Dr. Reed and Leckenfeld, that involve payment reform and those sort of things. There's also legislative bodies that regulate the practice of medicine. There's litigation that happens, as you heard about or you saw briefly about the blocking large insurance company mergers and suing the government for issues related to balance billing, which is one of the most recent issues. And so there are a lot of different things that can happen from policy. And so as you think about the problems that you face, the question is like, what are you trying to accomplish? What is the end goal? And so in the end, policies will drive action. That's the hope, right? So no one really wants to pass a policy that gets written into a book, filed away, and nothing ever happens with it, right? We're all trying to accomplish something. And so I caveat that with the fact that sometimes drafting policy is not necessarily the best way to accomplish it, right? So there may be sufficient policy on the books or sufficient recommendations or guidelines that support what you want to accomplish. And so writing policy may not be the best action. And so there are other things you can do within organized medicine to ensure that action is taken. It's just that, so the first step is, should we? And so when we look at an organization like the AMA, this is a big, busy graphic, but I don't really need you to read the nitty-gritty details. The overall concept is that you have a number of different feeders that go into impacting the policy that the House passes. And so there are councils that are developed specialties. So like, for example, a council on medical practice, there's a council on medical service, which have to do with the practice of medicine and the business of a lot of the business of medicine. Then you have science and public health, which deals with a lot of public health and prevention issues. And so these various specialty groups are subsections of their overall House of Delegates that consist of AMA members who develop expertise in those areas and in medical education, for example. So, for example, if you're an academic and you want to transform how medical education is done in the United States, then you want to be on the Council of Medical Education so that you can be with like-minded colleagues who are researching these relevant issues at the time and providing recommendations to the House of Medicine on how we should move forward through the various policy mechanisms and action items or action opportunities to make that sort of change. And so the main point of this slide is just to illustrate that the House of Delegates is a centralized body where all of these recommendations are heard. It's a democratic body where organizations and states are represented, sections, different life stages of practice. For example, you have the medical students, you have residents, young physicians, practicing physicians, senior physicians. So everybody's represented in this house, and ideas are put forth and voted on. And so if you don't like the policies or the way that things are being done, then this is a democratic organization where you have the both ability, onus, and responsibility to bring forth your ideas on how to make it better and convince your peers on how to do that. And so just like in anything, it requires coalition building and garnering support, doing your research, knowing your topic and your issues, and educating your peers on why your idea sounds like it's the right thing to do. And as Dr. Leckenfeld pointed out, sometimes you don't get everyone that first time. And so it requires perseverance as well. And so we don't need to spend any more time on this. It's just understanding that there is structure. And so the actions, as we mentioned, of the AMA House of Delegates can establish new policies.
That's not a really good picture shot.
It's all I can find. I apologize, but it's a policymaking in action. And so this is Dr. Reed at one of the House of Delegates testifying in front of
I was being really serious at that moment.
An issue, I'm sure. And excellent testimony, no doubt. And so there are bylaws, just like any organization should function. And so the bylaws have been changed over time to ensure that the House can be as balanced and fair and representative as possible and conduct this business in the fairest manner possible to ensure that all voices are heard and considered. And really the structure of the House and parliamentary procedure, all of that is really organized such that you ensure that the minority voice is heard and it's not quashed. Now, they still may lose the vote in terms of what the policy or the issue that is being voted on, but everyone has a chance to be heard. Then there's issues related to the board. And so this is where policies exist, but the board needs to do something. And so you can pass what they call a directive to action. This is a certain action item that requests that the board do something. And then there's other issues related to governance and how the organization works itself out. And so that's just some general things that can happen as an outcome, right? It's the action items related to the policy that you're thinking about developing. So then we talk about how to develop effective policy. So when you think about writing a resolution, which is basically your presentation of an idea before this democratic body, you want to ask yourself these questions, right? So you want to first ask yourself, is this medicine's wheelhouse, right? So some may say, you heard a lot about a few years ago, firearm and gun violence and policies related to that. And NRA was saying, well, stay in your lane. And clearly, if you worked in a trauma center, you understand what your lane is and you deal with a lot of these issues. And so this was something that was very clearly in our lane. Now, when you talk about maybe regulations that have to do with awnings on structures to prevent head injuries, yeah, that's maybe questionable, right? So that may be more architectural and structural related, even though it superficially or tangentially relates to public health and healthcare, probably not in the AMA's wheelhouse to deal with. And so just two extreme examples. So then is the policy that you're trying to accomplish feasible? And that's a hard one, right? And I think we always have to try to push the envelope on what we expect our organization to be able to do and accomplish. At the same time, understanding that there is political capital, there's a limited number of financial resources, and we can't do it all. And so the organization has adopted a number of strategic objectives to ensure that the major efforts of the organization, AMA specifically, are in line with that, so that we're trying to really focus on certain areas and move the needle and not spreading our efforts too thin or not diluting our political capital. when it comes to especially legislative issues. Is it advisable? So this one, I'm not sure if I have a very clear example. I don't know. Do any of the panelists have any idea of something that maybe not as advisable that would be considered?
I think the question of should it be done is one that is a self-searcher question.
And I think it's up to the individual who's bringing.
I think we lost your audio.
Yeah, your audio is not working.
Sound distant.
Not sure why.
There, it's okay now.
Okay. Should it be done? Is it advisable? I think that's a soul searcher question that needs to be vetted. And one of the ways that you vet these, should you take it to a national level, is that we take it to a state level first. We have the debate in a smaller group among physicians who are like-minded, sometimes, and sometimes not. And we have the debate in a smaller arena, and then craft the question and take it forward to the AMA. And that was one of the comments I was going to make about, a lot of the resolutions that you bring and we take to the AMA should go through your state or your society, medical society, and be vetted first there and have some of the debate before you put it on a national arena. And so to me, is it advisable? Should it be done? Needs to be done in a smaller group session within your section, within your specialty, within your state, and then brought forward.
Absolutely. And, as we think about, is it efficient, always thinking about, the expenditure of resources, as physicians, we are responsible for the individual patient in front of us, but we also have this tension of society and understanding that resources are not unlimited and trying to find that balance. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you have to consider when thinking about resolutions, and especially when you're talking about smaller minority populations, not necessarily in terms of ethnicity and those sort of things, but maybe like rare diseases, for example. And how much expenditure should we have for rare disease or a expanding life expectancy that could be very costly in some conditions. Looking at the overall perspective on what else can be done. And then, so the last two questions segue to the next two slides of, has this idea already been suggested? And is there policy already on the books that would address your concerns? And to my point before, maybe there's policy there that it's fairly inclusive or broad enough to support what you'd like to do. So in which case you might ask for, instead of new policy, a directive for action. So you might ask your organization to do something specific in support of a certain policy because there is a certain pressing issue that has arisen or come to light. And so in that vein, there's a couple ways you can do this. So AMA has a policy finder. You basically type in your keywords, just like in PubMed, and look to see what are the existing policies out there. I think, I don't know, I'll leave the panelists here, but I imagine maybe 80 to 60% of resolutions brought every year probably could be covered by existing policy. And really you need maybe a directive to action, or you need to liaise with the board or some other council to kind of advance the agenda. What are your thoughts? How much novel policy do we really see every year?
I think an important point that we may need to make about policy is that both Medical Association of Georgia and AMA look at their policies every 5 years, and they make a recommendation to either sunset, continue, and renew for another 5 years, or revise those policies. But if you are bringing a new idea to a policy that's already existing, it needs to be a fundamental new idea to that policy. You need to know what the existing policy is on record, or it's just going to be reaffirmed. If you don't bring a new nuance to it with, like Shami says, there's something else out there that we need to deal with, or there's a call to action that we need to deal with, then it's going to just be reaffirmed, and your effort to bring this forward is just going to be, put on the consent calendar. So you can still pull it and debate it, but it may not go very far unless you find that nuance that you want to take forward. And that's an important point that we need to bring forward to everybody to understand. If there is existing policy, you can debate it, you can bring forward, but you need to find that nuance that's different in the policy to bring new policy forward.
Can I make a point here, which I just, I'm not sure if it's coming through or not. The role of what we're talking about here as a process is to take an idea, a concept. It may be a small idea, or it may be a very big idea. So, for example, reform of healthcare payment system is a very big idea, and that's going to come from major organizations and going forward. But sometimes there are smaller ideas. They may not be a small idea to you, but they're in the scheme of the world, they're a smaller piece of a much larger puzzle. This is a process, and I say this with all sincerity. For those of you who may not be familiar with what happens at the AMA, and I don't know, somebody help me out. I don't know if the meetings are broadcast virtually. I've been going to them for so long that I don't know if there's a virtual option. I don't think there is. This is a process that's perhaps one of the most democratic processes, one of the most democratic processes that I have ever participated or could ever hope to participate in. And frankly, I think it's probably the most democratic process that could be designed. What does that mean in practicality? That means that when you have a thought or you have an idea and you're sitting there and it strikes you that this is important for your patients, this is important for the health of the country, it may be something to do with the environment, it may have something to do with a number of other issues, you have the option of taking that idea forward and driving it all the way home to the highest level of policy that exists in the House of Medicine, and that's the AMA House of Delegates. But you have to do your homework, and that's what Shami's referring to. You've got to check to make sure what is the existing policy. You need to find out both at the state level and the national level. And let's assume that that policy is not something that's up to speed or it's not current. Some of these policies can be years, decades old. And if that's the case, maybe it needs to be completely revised. You can then, as an individual or as a small group, come together, write do the research first with the policy things we've been talking about. Do the research, put together a resolution. We haven't talked much about how you write a resolution. But you have the background, which is the quote whereases, and then you have the resolves, which are the actions. You can take that to your county medical society. Your county medical society can take it to the Medical Association House of Delegates. Medical Association House of Delegates can take it nationally to the AMA. But you have to respect that it has to be good policy. You've done your homework. It's a good use of everybody's time and effort because there's capital invested all along the way. And then if it's passed as AMA policy, it can make a difference. I'm going to disagree a little bit with Shami. Not everything gets into the big book that the AMA takes forward and says, we're going to fight for this. example I might use, and I won't go into long detail maybe later, is colorectal cancer screening. Sitting in a Georgia meeting, when I was with the Cancer Society, a meeting of Georgia folks, both docs and patients and advocacy people, it became evident about how colorectal cancer screening can be paid for. A lot more detail, I won't get into it now. Turns out the Cancer Society had been working on that issue for the American Cancer Society to try to get the problem fixed for a number of years. But the reality was that moment, at that time, we said, well, we can take it forward. We did. We took it through the Georgia ACP chapter. We took it to the Medical Association. Medical Association passed it, and it got passed at the AMA House of Delegates after a lot of wheeling and dealing, so to speak, to try to make sure it's clean. Now, that AMA didn't become the leading supporter of that payment reform, but it was a help to be able to say the AMA policy exists. And I'm glad to say the policy has been changed. It literally took an act of Congress over the course of years to make that happen. One meeting, one place, one idea, one thought. So, I don't want to take any more time on this, but here's the bottom line. This is a very democratic process. It does respond to your thoughts, your needs, your perceptions. May not always get the answer you want, but if you do it wisely and do it appropriately and with the respect for the process, so to speak, meaning that you're not going to waste people's time, you can really have an impact. So I think that's background that we all should keep in mind. Democracy, this really is democracy in action all the way through. The AMA meeting, everybody gets heard. Everybody gets heard and has the opportunity to say their piece, build coalitions, and advance what they're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
I'll just punctuate that the writing process shouldn't be foreign to us as physicians, because it's much like the same process you use when you write a paper, right? You're not going to try to publish a paper with findings that have been found before and already replicated, right? So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We really do want to try to find something novel. You want to show your references and show, you know what you've done. Do your lit review, know your subject area. Don't just think of an idea and you're like, hey guys, let's try this. Let's try this idea and see if it works. You really do need to know what's been done before, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and have answers for those folks who may be a little bit more skeptical or unsure about where you're going with this and how you want to accomplish this. And I think that's how you pass good policies, by knowing your ins and outs and understanding what can be accomplished and what can't be accomplished, and using the process in your favor and building coalitions. And so getting co-authors, getting support from constituent societies and other stakeholders is a key part of that. So before we get to the open mic portion, I do want to just generally review the format in which policies are written so that you know the lay of the land and the game that you have to play. So usually this is the structure, right? So you'll oftentimes start with a coalition at the top, right? So you get a couple like-minded folks who share your interests or share your concerns, and you'll start with your resolve clause. What is the thing that you want accomplished, right? You may start with some of the whereas clauses which justify why you're doing it, right? When there's evidence out there already, or say a news story just published and there was some revelation of an issue that became apparent to you. But the whereas clauses are kind of the why you're doing it. The resolve clause is the meat of what you hope to accomplish, right? So this is the either directive to take action, the policy, a new policy that you want to pass, the change in governance or structure that you hope to accomplish. And so oftentimes you'll start with this line, and you'll want to make it as simple as possible. Many of us have found out the hard way, when you try to get too wordy, you lose people, right? These are physicians, and as much as you expect them to do their homework and read before they come, they don't, because we all have busy lives and clinical practices, and you really need to spoon feed to people what it is you're trying to do and keeping it simple. Generally, as a premise, when you're writing policy, it's always better to write broad policy that may apply to different situations that would be applicable, rather than to write something that's very specific and narrow, because it also limits the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. And it's a fine balance. But generally speaking, if you're getting too specific in terms of micromanaging how you want your policy to be enacted, you may run into some trouble in that situation. I can't reiterate enough. It's always important to know who your opponents are and understanding people who disagree with you and why they disagree with you, because the goal is to try to find that win-win. Try to find areas where you can get support, recognizing that you're not going to be able to do that all the time. And so as you build that coalition, or if you are able to get people that don't think exactly the same way you do, but maybe share some central premise, they could give you some good ideas on how you can find that middle road and garner the most support possible. Not always going to happen, but ideally, that's what we should always strive for. Any other thoughts from the panelists on just the anatomy and overall structure? Does that sound true to you?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think being really clear that actually those whereas clauses, I think Len may have mentioned already, are really the why, or you mentioned the why, but they actually do not become policy. It's the resolve clauses at the end become actual policies. And those resolve clauses should be able to stand alone, each individual resolve that you have at the end. So just add those 2 points. And you don't have to actually explain what you're doing in the resolve, because in the whereas clauses, that's where you had all the data, the references, recent data explaining the why it's a problem and the scope of the issue and why you need to resolve policy in the first place.
I was going to make the same comment that the whereas is not what's published in policy. It is the resolved that has to stand alone. So that's my only comment about the comment.
And I have nothing further to say because everybody's already said what has to be said. So the whereases go away. It's amazing. It's actually amazing. I now that I started, it really is fascinating that even people who are knowledgeable about this process really don't understand the whereases go away. Number one. Number two, put the effort into making sure that your whole resolution is well crafted. We have looked, all of us on this panel, we have looked at thousands, I mean thousands of resolutions. We don't spend a whole lot of time. We can't look at every element of every resolution, yet we have to make decisions, and unfortunately have to make decisions on the fly sometimes. And the quality of what you write and the quality of what you're trying to accomplish really comes through. So there have been situations where delegations have been asked to take resolutions forward where the wisdom of the MAG House of Delegates may be that that's a good idea to take it forward. But then you get to the big show where people are really pretty smart about this stuff. I mean, some of these folks live, breathe, and die, from it, but they live and breathe it. And it shows pretty quickly what's worth looking at and what's not. Now, you may not agree with that, but the reality is that's what happens. And if you don't put the effort into this process in front of you now to make sure that it's well done, well crafted, all the things we've talked about, it shows up. When you get up to the AMA, it shows up pretty quickly. And unfortunately, if your delegation is charged with carrying it forward, so a medical association delegation may be charged by its local state House of Delegates to take something forward, and it gets immediately blown out of the park, that impacts how other people look at the other material you're bringing forward. That's a sad reality of politics. So investing in this process, what we're seeing here, is probably one of the most important first steps that anyone can take to a successful outcome on a national level.
It's a credibility issue, and Len is absolutely correct. And we have seen it in the Georgia House of Delegates when we've been asked to take something forward and it has passed our House of Delegates, and we have to craft it to take to the AMA, and we have to present it as the AMA delegation, and it's not always well received. And there's only so much political capital you have. So if you're viewed as being marginalizing by your resolution, that can affect other more important issues that you want to bring forward. So my caution is, think about what you're bringing forward. Think about who it will affect. Think about whether this is a state issue or whether this is a national issue, and write your resolutions carefully. Make them succinct, because the more succinct, I think, the more successful they are. But you've got to put your information in there to justify making it a viable resolution. But understand that there are about 1,000 people in the House of Delegates, and there are about 150 people in the MAG House of Delegates, and everybody has an opinion. So just understand that not everybody's opinion will always agree with yours, but we are a respectful organization, both of them, and we debate with integrity, and we do bring our opinions to the table, and we establish policy. And that is what sets our ability from a MAG point of view to be able to go and debate on a state level for issues that are important to the physicians and the patients of Georgia. It's also what establishes the AMA policy to establish issues that they need to debate on our behalf on a national level. And we have specialty societies, we have state societies, and on a state level, we have county societies and specialty societies who bring their issues together. They're debated in a respectful way. And we do come up with resolutions of these policies, and we do take them forward, and then we debate them on a national level to take our message forward and bring exposure to our issues on a national level. And that's the importance of being involved. It's the importance of being on this call. It's the importance of taking your thoughts and what you're dealing with and the issues that you're facing with patient care and physician issues forward, so that we then can take up the reins and take them to a higher level and get help. Because believe me, if we're dealing with this in Georgia, they're dealing with it across the country. And that's what makes a coalition. That's what makes this work. And that's how we progress and make progress in practice for the physicians in the country.
Can I make a very quick point here, just for clarification? We've talked a lot about AMA. A lot of policies are state specific and apply, what's going on in the state of Georgia. So, for example, Medicaid expansion in Georgia is a critical issue. That goes to the MAG House of Delegates. That does not automatically get taken to the AMA. So, many of these issues, and I'm sure that all of you who are on this call have issues that you're deeply committed to, and where medical association policy, which dictates these policy discussions are important, because when the Medical Association goes and testifies in front of our House and Senate here in Georgia, they need to know what our internal policies. Bethany Scherer was on the call. She still is. I know she wants to make a comment, but when you sit in front of the legislators, you have to have the policy book behind you, and Medical Association Georgia is pretty good about that. So a lot of this stuff can be local as well, and locally focused. Not all of it goes national.
Yeah, thank you both for punctuating those details. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think the overall message is that it's important to be engaged. The policymaking process is complex, but that's why we're here. The whole reason we're here tonight is to kind of demystify a lot of this for you and hear your thoughts about what you think should happen and try to figure out how we can make that come to fruition. So far, we've covered generally what policy accomplishes. We've talked about how policy generally gets passed in a democratic body, and the resolution writing process of what that generally looks like. And so initially I was going to have us talk about some policies that we passed recently, but I think in the interest of time, it would be really great to hear from the audience members. The goal of the session was to be more of a roundtable discussion where you can ask questions or kind of spitball ideas that you might have or problems that you're facing, so that you might be able to benefit from some of the expertise that's here today on how to move forward with those ideas. And so with that, I'll open up the floor to anyone. Please do not feel shy. There's no silly ideas. We understand that for some of you, this is the first time, so it's not a big deal. There are no stupid questions.
And Shami, I think that's really an important point. This whole thing can be really intimidating. If you're sitting there saying, what do I do? How do I get? There's only one way to get involved, and that's to get involved. And you go, you look, you listen, you engage, and everyone on this call, and unfortunately, almost all of us as physicians. First of all of us physicians all have opinions. There's no shortage of opinions among physicians. That's number one. And number two, we all have ideas, and we can all learn how to do this. We all started somewhere, and I promise you, it didn't start with knowing everything that we have learned over the course of years.
I do just want to reiterate that this process is actually transferable to any medical society or state society or specialty societies. It's not just the AMA or the Medical Association of Georgia. So if you want to take this back to your specialty group, you can usually they have a similar process as well.
And it's transferable to the House of, I'm getting a feedback here. House of Representatives and the Senate. We've had people and doctors who participate in the House of Delegates who run for office and are elected, and putting aside the politics of the whole thing, Tom Price is an excellent example. He learned how to do this in the Medical Association of Georgia and the AMA House of Delegates. Now, some may have a different political opinion than Tom, but the reality is that's where he learned the process. And believe it or not, the process is not much different scale, different outcomes, different whatevers. But, and there are a lot of people who also on the other side of the aisle who have gone through this and ended up running for office, state and national offices. So, and having physician representation in the legislatures is critically important, as many of us are well aware.
And another point that I will make is do not underestimate your involvement as a leader, as a physician in the state. Len and I have had the opportunity to host many members of the House of Representatives sitting around our table at dinner to discuss rural medicine and the opportunities and the frustrations that we face. So the more that you are involved and the more that you speak up and become engaged, it's a two-edged sword, because you're going to be asked more and you're going to be tagged more, but it also gives you a voice and an opportunity to exchange your ideas with some of the top legislators sitting around a dinner table. And you cannot underestimate the value of sitting around the table breaking bread with your legislators and getting their opinions and letting them hear your opinions. And that is another important aspect of what this is about. It's bringing your ideas forward. It's passing policy so that our medical organizations have policy to deal with the issues, but it's also about you being engaged on an individual level and knowing who your legislators are and inviting them to your home for a forum or a dinner to discuss these issues. And just when they phone and they call and they ask, just say yes. I don't know how you're going to make it happen. I didn't know how we would make it happen, but we made it happen. Just say yes, and you'll be on the list. You're going to be tagged, though. I will tell you, they'll be calling. But that's the way you get engaged, and that's the way you get your message across. And it's important to stay engaged.
All right. So, Dr. Reed, you're already gone into like 201 and 401 sessions here. Let's take a break. If anyone needs to buy a break, please feel free. In the meanwhile, for those of you folks who are here listening, you might introduce yourself and give us an idea of kind of where you're at in life, and just so we know who we're talking to. I'll call people since I know that this is somewhat awkward and you don't know. Young you, I think you're first on my list. People, you mind just briefly telling us kind of where you're at, what you're up to?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm a medical student. I'm an M4 now, which is crazy. Just finished the M3 year. Dr. Das is our faculty advisor for Emory AMA for the student session, and we just took over. I'm the president. I think we have some members here tonight, but that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm just kind of here to listen and see what's going on.
Awesome, welcome. You won't regret it. Jane St. Clair, I have you next on my list.
I got interested in tobacco when I took the tobacco treatment specialist course with Duke, and I was doing that to study during COVID. I wanted to be board certified in addiction. So I thought, well, let me learn about tobacco. This will be an easy way to prepare for the boards. And I got real interested in the menthol issue because it's such a health disparities issue. And I can't believe there are so many people that don't think like I do. So I'm working with the Atlanta group now, and hopefully we'll get to the state level after we get it passed in Atlanta.
Wonderful. Have you met Dr. Gary Richter? I know he's very passionate about this issue. We'll connect you.
No, but I'll have to.
Yeah, perfect. Dale Taylor.
So is Dr. Lichtenfeld.
And Dr. Lichtenfeld, exactly. So we have a few people to connect you with.
Good, thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dale Tager. I'm actually an incoming M4 student after finishing up my MBA, so I'm a dual degree. I kind of came a little late to the game, to the AMA club. Kind of after pursuing business school and my third year rounds, I really got passionate about addiction medicine too, and I'm thinking of going into anesthesia. And eventually pain and studying addiction. I'm doing some work with some Grady docs on the opioid crisis. I think that's a topic that I'm really passionate about. So, I kind of want to get, after getting an MBA, I kind of want to get my feet wet in like some higher level thinking on these issues, not just at the bedside, but hopefully down the road when I'm more experienced with some policy changes. So it's just a pleasure listening to Dr. Reed and Doss and everyone here. And didn't know about how this process worked, and I'm just happy to get it started. So thanks very much for having me. I'm a delegate, alternative delegate for AMA.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
I will say that, over the years, some of the best policies have come from the medical student section. And it's well known that for many folks, the medical student section represents kind of the conscience of the AMA, and in many ways keeps us honest, because as you practice more and more, your brain shifts more to reimbursements and some of the business and medicine things, and you lose sight of why you embarked on this journey in the first place. And I think the medical students keep us honest, and they constantly push the envelope on what the organization should be focused on and doing. And I think in many ways has benefited the organization. So don't sell yourself short. I think even as a medical student, there's so much you offer from your perspective. And as most of the folks here will attest, is that you have the most to gain from it. You have the most at stake because you have the longest practice ahead of you. So, it's great to have you here. Jordan.
So also at the AMA, your medical students are welcome to the MAG delegation when we meet. So look us up, find out which suite we're in, and come and tell us what's important to the medical students. But join MAG. It's cheap for medical students. And then participate with the debate and tell us what's important for you so we can take it forward to the House.
Absolutely. And, for anyone who is going to the June meeting, we will make sure you're plugged into MAG, because that's kind of the central coordinating body. And, you'll get all the information about the meetings and how to get plugged in. There's so much knowledge and experience, just like in your wards, right? You have attendants here that are here to help you and show you the ropes. Jordan Freeman, where you at?
Hi, everybody. I'm a second-year resident at Northside Gwinnett, and I am a member of MAG. Went to the House of Delegates last year, and it was very interesting. Highly, highly recommend. It was a great experience. I've always been interested in kind of health policy, and as I really start taking care of patients, moving from learning about the patients to trying to do what I think is best for them, and hitting a lot of roadblocks all the time on the wards in the clinic, it's frustrating, and it's interesting, and I want to do something about it. I have a lot of energy, and I'm here because I want to figure out how to do something about it and who the people are that are doing things about it. And I think this is the first step to doing that. And I'd like to see different examples of what's happening right now, how it happens, and at some point try to, some of my own ideas, try to move those forward.
Wonderful. And one of the ways you can keep abreast of what goes on currently, and as Bethany Scherer can tell you, that MAG puts out a weekly brief on what's going on at the state level. So it's always a great, and I'm going to have her introduce herself briefly because it sounds like she has to get going. But it's a great way to keep abreast of what's going on at the state level. As Dr. Richard Leckenfeld said, that's where the majority of the legislation happens that impacts the practice of medicine. Bethany, why don't you go ahead and go next?
Thank you. I'm Bethany Scherer. I am the Director of Government Relations and General Counsel for the Medical Association of Georgia. I apologize for having my video off. We are at day 30, so crossover day was 2 days ago, and I'm recovering. We have an 8 a.m. meeting again tomorrow morning, so I'm just trying to get my head back into getting some important legislation passed related to mental health and prices of drugs and all kinds of things. But I'm really appreciative to be here. I am the person that, if you write a resolution to the Medical Association of Georgia's House of Delegates, basically takes that resolution from the point that you do it all the way through until it's implemented in whatever way the House acts on it. So I do the majority of our kind of policy creation and policy implementation between the several different hats that I wear at the association. I'm going to put my name and email address and cell phone number in the chat box, and that way you all have it if you decide that you want to write a resolution. I would greatly appreciate it if you waited until like May 1st to reach out to me, but I am always happy to help you with any ideas that you might have. And yeah, so I'm any questions that anybody has related to like kind of how the initial process works, I'm happy to answer those now. But you've got great veteran people here on the call with you that probably know this process better than I do.
Thank you, Bethany, and I think you need a standing applause.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
So one of the most important things that Bethany and her team does is keep abreast of issues that are going on at the Capitol, because not all the medical policies are brought forward by physicians. And so, a lot of times they're brought forward by well-meaning legislators who don't always understand the implication of the bedside. And so they are there to keep an eye on things, to make sure things don't go sideways. And sometimes they do, but without them at the constant presence at the Capitol.
Or this year they were brought by undertakers.
It's all over the place. If I could give you a glimpse into the reality of the things that I hear that don't actually make the light of day, that's the scary stuff. The stuff that you all do eventually hear about is bad enough. The stuff that I have to hear about that we stop from ever seeing the light of day, that's the stuff that'll really scare you. So your participation in organized medicine is so important. It is so important that we have a diverse group of people from age, from background, from every kind of diversity possible is important to what we do. I need to hear from people who are medical students. So like someone said, don't discount the fact that you're a medical student. That doesn't make your voice any less important. You may not be in the midst of running a practice or seeing your own set of patients, but you have an insight into what medical education looks like and what it looks like for you, and trying to get out of school and find a job and where you want to practice because of policies and practices that the state puts in place, and how those impact your decision making as a medical student is extremely important. And I always want to hear from you. I know I made a joke about don't call me until after May 1st, but that was really just related to resolutions. If it's about a policy you see at the Capitol or just about an issue you're having in your practice, I am almost always available and happy to talk things through with you. So I appreciate all of you and everyone on this call, and keep up the good work. Good luck. I know match day was recently. I don't know if we have any fourth year medical students who just went through, or is it tomorrow? I don't know. Is the announcement?
It's Friday.
Okay.
They know that they've matched,
I know some things. I don't know what day it is of the week.
They know whether they match, but they don't know where.
Which match? Are we talking about the medical match or the NCAA match?
That was a bad joke.
Not a bad joke. They all know what's coming. I'm glad we have this many people here on St. Patrick's Eve. I'm really impressed. So.
Well, good. Well, good luck to everybody. Exciting times, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
We get to give congratulations and congratulations tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alrighty. Mariana Duran. Where you at?
Hi. I'm Mariana. I am a delegate of the new AMA board, the transition period. I am really thankful for all of you guys putting on this session. I wish this kind of was a required session for all medical students, because I think it's so important for everyone to know a little bit about how policies are made and how this applies to us so directly. But I think my particular interests revolve around equity and making sure that patients have great access to care, which is very limited, unfortunately, in our country.
It is being recorded. We could suggest that it be played.
That's right. So, I think sometimes we get stuck in the ivory tower and lose sight of clinical medicine. And I think, interestingly, there's probably more non-academics involved in organized medicine than there are in organized medicine, because in academia, we're somewhat sheltered from a lot of the forces that impact practicing docs. But many of you will be clinicians in the community one day. And so it's important to start that journey early and understand, like you said, the importance of this. So now you've heard the gospel, go forth and spread it. Okay, great. Tisha Titus, where are you at? Maybe not here. Is it Isari Pitatong? Hey, right.
Hi,
Hey.
my name is Isari. This is Isari. I'm a first year medical student, so I'm still at the very beginning of my medical journey. But I got an email about this. I wanted to learn more about implementing and making new policies. So that's why I'm here to learn.
So can I ask where you are a student?
Yeah, I'm at Emory.
At Emory? Okay. Let's hear from the other folks too, because I want to make a point about what we've been discussing and how it actually impacts medical students, residents here in the state of Georgia. But let's hear from, I guess, Jane is the next Shami, and then I just want to come back.
I'll say that, for all the seriousness of our conversation here, we'd be lying to say that we didn't go to the meetings and had a lot of fun.
Fun. You got a strange definition of fun, buddy.
Outside of the meetings, there are dinners, there are cocktail hours, there are the camaraderie that you experience.
And there's 6 o'clock in the morning meetings.
It's a lot of work. It is fun. I don't mean to. I shouldn't be so cynical when I make those comments. You meet a lot of folks. You make a lot of friendships. You have a lot of impact. It is at times a lot of work, and it's a commitment. Sandra, for example, talked about driving back and forth from Thomasville to Atlanta to testify in the legislature. Tremendous amount of commitment that she made, and I respect a great deal. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's very rewarding. Let's hear from Jane, and then I'll come back because I want to talk about that practical aspect of what can happen if how you can make a difference.
Okay, hi, I'm Jane Ellis. I'm going to leave my camera off too because I have a piano player and 3 barking dogs. I'm trying to hide in the basement from the dogs, but one of the border collies just found me, so she is standing here looking over my shoulder. I'm sorry. You may hear some bark.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm just trying to hide from these border collies. I'm a maternal fetal medicine doc, Emory, based at Grady. And I think my primary interest and passion is for women's health in Georgia. I'm a founding member of Georgia's Maternal Mortality Review Committee, and we're meeting tomorrow. I have to go prep cases for that. And I've am involved in rolling out some evidence-based bundles across the state to improve women's health care, particularly in the rural areas, like postpartum hemorrhage, hypertension, and now we're rolling out the cardiac bundle because those are the leading causes of maternal mortality in Georgia as well as nationally. I've had some experience with the legislature too. I provided testimony on the maternal level of care bill. David Ralston appointed me to a committee, a subcommittee chaired by Sharon Cooper to look at maternal mortality in Georgia and reduction. I'm happy to say that our recommendation for Medicaid extension for postpartum care to 1 year looks like it's going to pass in the legislature this year. So it's such a privilege to be a physician and to be an advocate for women's health. I did participate in the House of Delegates meeting last October down on Jekyll, primarily because I grew up on St. Simon's and that was a good opportunity to go home. But I found that to be a very interesting meeting. I presented a resolution from the Georgia OBGYN Society about prohibiting the interference of the patient-physician relationship or punishing physicians for practicing. I appreciate the opportunity to join tonight. Thank you, Sandra, for making me aware of this.
Well, Jane, I appreciate you being here, and I know what you do for the state and for women in the state, and I appreciate everything you do. And, you know, when we say it takes a village to rear a child, it takes a whole community and village and state to keep patients safe and represent healthcare. And so it's not a one-on-one. One person can't accomplish it, but as a team and as a group, we can. And so I appreciate what you do because one person can't do everything. So I appreciate what you do for women's health in this state.
Thank you. It's such a privilege.
Shami, can I come back for a minute now that everybody's introduced themselves? And I just want to make a point to the medical students out there about sometimes the things you don't know, nor did you necessarily know. Fortunately, you're starting from here and you're going to have a whole different career and learn a lot more than I know for sure. You're starting from a better place. But Sandra talked earlier about the dinners. And I'm looking here, and Jordan actually has been to our house for dinner, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, advocacy takes a lot of different forms, and you've already heard one. So Dr. Ellis just mentioned about her role in maternal mortality. That's advocacy, and getting on those committees, responding to Speaker Ralston, the committee appointment, is advocacy. Tracy, Sandra, Shami, myself, we do advocacy in a lot of different ways. One of the points, you talk about how things happen. What Sandra mentioned, it was true. We lived in Thomasville, Georgia, South Georgia. A legislative committee came to South Georgia to learn about the physician shortage in that area. We had the privilege of hosting them the night before the hearing. They had a hearing in a local hospital. We had the privilege of hosting them in our house, and we got barbecue and some takeout stuff, whatever, and
we had fixins.
We had fixings. Okay, that's what they call in South Georgia. But they had all the stuff. And the bottom line is this: that we had an opportunity to sit down with legislators. Sharon Cooper was there, Bush Parrish was there, Lee Hawkins. There were some others. Those relationships have existed, by the way, and you get to know people on a one-to-one personal basis. We don't all get to do that, and you may never have a chance to do it, but we did at that moment. And the next day we had a hearing. And in fact, it was a physician who's now a GYN in a practice here in Atlanta, who was from Emory, who had done a research program on OB services available in the state of Georgia and presented that at that hearing in South Georgia. The net result of that was that we have a lot more medical schools and a lot more residency slots in this state than we would have had otherwise. Not because of our dinner. We were a very small part of a much larger picture. But, that one-on-one went a long way. It made a difference. And, I and Sandra and I both are very, very grateful to have had that opportunity. It's not all about just the resolutions at the MAG House of Delegates and the AMA. It's sometimes the one-on-one advocacy that happens with your legislator in your district, being knowledgeable. We have a friendship with Dean Burke, who's a physician in the Georgia Senate. And Sharon Cooper still is our doggy. Somebody here had a dog that they said they were down in the basement because of the border collie. Well, I've got Riley here, and Riley made an appearance at the Medical Association House of Delegates, and Sharon picked him up, and it's a great picture, just spontaneously. Here's the point. Legislation is not, it's a team effort. it's a team effort. It's not individual. Advocacy is a team effort, I should say. And legislators, particularly here in Georgia, you may not like some of them. I don't like some of them. I'll just say it myself. A lot of them I like one-on-one as people. And you have opportunities to make a difference in ways that you never dreamed. And having more medical schools, having more residencies, yeah, I think that the Medical Association got behind it, and the legislators got behind it, and I think we can all take a lot of pride that for young folks like yourselves, there's more opportunity now here in Georgia. Not enough, but there's more opportunity now than we ever would have dreamed about 10 years ago. So a concrete example of how it makes a difference for folks like yourselves as you look at this and say, well, what does this mean to me? It means a lot to a lot of people, and it certainly means a lot to the citizens of this state that have that resource available.
And there's still a lot of need for.
We got a long way to go. We're not done.
Yeah.
You got a lot to do, kids. I shouldn't say kids. You're young. Sorry
kids
about that.
to
Boy, I wasn't good on that one. But you know,
look.
I call Sandra my kid.
If you're under 40, you're still kids.
Sorry about that. I don't mean to be. Hey, you know what's real? I want to say something else, if I may. And Tracy, I don't know. You maybe give you a chance to weigh in on this too. The medical students, and Shami and Sandra sort of alluded to that. Y'all are really terrific because you're not jaded the way we are. You've not heard no, 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 no. You've heard why not. And you do come from a different generation, and you do have different perspectives. And we, you know, I know I'm saying there are a lot of things about healthcare and structural racism and access, and they've been pointed out here, that are really critically important that people have not talked about. They've not done what has to be done. And you're carrying that forward. And as Shami said, the conscience of the AMA and the House of Delegates are the medical students. So congratulations to you. And it's really terrific. We haven't done much listening tonight. We've done a lot of talking. I guess that's what happens all the time, isn't it? But don't think that in our hearts. And Jordan, I hope you know this, so you can vouch for us. I feel that you're keeping me honest here. It's great to be able to listen, be part of conversations. And those of us who are on this call and elsewhere who are leaders really enjoy what you bring to that table. It's valuable. Tracy, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that because
well, thanks, Len, for bringing that up. I know he's referring to some of the work our students at Emory did, and basically having DeKalb County say that or declare that racism is a public health crisis. And this just began out of medical students, first and second year medical students, just wanting to get involved, do something, but also become doctors one day. And the student it led that is now a third year medical student, Jasmine Eatman, and she's very interested in OBGYN. I think she's also works with Dr. Reed as well. And definitely medical students, I would say residence fellows and early career docs were all are the conscience of medicine, because we have not learned per se how to play the game. But as we go up, as we age into this profession, we start getting disheartened by what we're seeing. We realize that we have to pay the bills. We're paying back student loans. We learn how to play the game. We stop fighting, so to speak. And so I really urge you guys to not stop fighting and have this urge, like Dr. Reed and Dr. Leckenfeld. They're always fighting the good fight. And they are not early career physicians, but they are still very much on the front line.
You're calling us old.
Remember Bozo. Remember Bozo, okay? We keep coming back, you know.
I'm aging. I'm definitely aging out of that as well.
Hey, guess
but
what?
I don't want to give out.
We will open our house up for this conversation at any point in time, and we can all sit down and break bread together
And we will
if
do that.
anybody's interested, and we would do that.
Yeah. We enjoy
I
it.
do want you guys to leave here with thinking about what keeps you up at night, what makes you mad, sad, or angry. And those are your ideas for resolution. And I mean, that's really what the take home is that it's doable. You don't have to feel overwhelmed by, oh my God, how am I going to write this? I hate writing. Literally just whatever you want to do. If it's, for instance, 20 years ago, when it was about bicyclers, recyclers, and children being mandated to wear helmets. And so your thing might be all children under the age of 16 should be mandated by law to wear helmets, but then that's your policy. And then you can go back and do all of your data and research and look things up. And those would be your whereas clauses. And of course, you over time, when you send it out to all of your stakeholders, for instance, the Pediatric Association, your state medical society, whomever, grassroots organizations, you get those folks involved, get them on your side, make them co-sponsors, and then you have a resolution. So literally it's just starting with an idea, whatever makes you sad, angry, mad, upset, that's your policy. And then you kind of work backwards, do the background, get folks involved, have everyone look at it. And then you have a policy that is more likely to be passed at your medical society or state medical association.
Yeah,
Tracy, I think you just summed up the entire meeting about how to get forward and make a resolution.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, so to illustrate that, the reason you don't smoke on an airplane came about from the medical student section of resolutions that started the conversation and pushed the agenda on. It was a workplace safety issue for the folks who work on the planes. The same reason why we are doing more research on social determinants of health. It didn't happen from the practicing docs. It was from the medical students pushing the agenda that this is important. It impacts patients' outcomes and something we need to track. So there are countless examples about how ideas like that have started within a section and have percolated and worked their way up and have significantly impacted healthcare and the world in which we live. And so, so as we wrap up, we have just a minute here. I don't want to shortchange anybody. So if you do have an idea that you just want to figure out how to take that next step, we're here. I think we're done with our part of the talk. Unfortunately, it went longer than expected, but hopefully you still, there's still tons of valuable information actually that was discussed. But if you have an idea that you want to start percolating and want to get a couple leads on where to go, this would be a great time to ask.
And if not, you can always email us.
All right.
I think everybody wants dinner.
It's St. Patrick's Day, and so I think there is still an opportunity to not let the moment pass by. Thank you all so much for joining us, especially the fellow panelists who took out time for their schedule and made themselves available and shared their stories. We are obviously available. If you had the invite to the meeting, please feel free to respond to any of the panelists for our emails. If you don't have anyone's email, you can email me, sdos@emory.edu, pretty simple, sdos@emory, and I will connect you with any of the other panelists. It looks like Tracy Henry put her information there as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out. Bethany Scherer is always a valuable resource, especially when you're thinking about policies. We are here to support you, and if you're interested in getting more involved in organized medicine at any level, or if you're like Dr. Allison are already well involved and want to figure out how to share your experience, please don't hesitate. I think the more we work together and break bread together, I think for a lot of us, this is a sense of well-being and fulfillment from our daily grind. All right, folks. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to spend the evening with you. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Be careful.
I do have a green scarf on. I want everybody
Hey,
to see it.
Good night, everybody.